Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's webinar, 30 on Thursday's webinar, Creating Mobile SharePoint Dashboards with SQL 2016 Mobile Reports. Just a little bit about us before we get started. Protiviti is a global consulting firm that serves more than 40% of Fortune 1000 and Fortune Global 500 companies. Our ECM practice has been a Microsoft Gold partner for 14 years, and we have helped hundreds of clients realize the true value of SharePoint. Our 30 on Thursday webinar series is a bi-weekly 30-minute webinar series where we talk all things SharePoint and enterprise content management. Today's session is being recorded. The recording of today's session is going to be on our YouTube channel with an archive of all of our past sessions. Our next webinar will be on September 15th, SharePoint Taxonomy 101. You can register for that webinar and see our full schedule on our website, ecm.protiviti.com. Today's presenters is Michael Mast, Director at Protiviti, and Michael Essling, Solution Architect here at Protiviti. For all the questions during today's presentation, please insert them in the question window of the GoToMeeting toolbar or live tweet us your questions at Protiviti ECM using the hashtag 30TDashboards. We will save all of your questions until after today's presentation. All right, let's get started. Michael, you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, and appreciate everyone joining us today. We've been doing a lot recently with mobile reporting, specifically as it relates to risks and issue tracking. So for many of you that have compliance, audit, risk management type functions, these are the kind of solutions that they've been looking for. And what we want to do is we want to walk through a couple things on today's agenda, the mobile reports, how to go about creating them. So we'll go through a little demonstration exercise of some already built reports. We'll get into an example, how you connect the dots and kind of take advantage of this. And then we'll talk about the report user experience. And, you know, the SQL mobile reports has a history both in SSRS and the traditional reporting stack, but also in an acquisition Microsoft did of Dataset. And in 2016, these are kind of folded together, and we'll walk through what that experience is like. So with that, we want to, just before we get into some of the how-to, we want to get into a demonstration of different report information. And the first thing that you'll notice is we've created a risk-related dashboard here, and we'll get into the various device level information that you'll be able to do. We're going to drill down. You'll notice on the board here we've got different information that's known as tiles, where you can plot graphs, charts, gauges, and they can come from different data sources. So they can come from SharePoint, any kind of database, be it SQL, Oracle, or SharePoint lists. And we'll get into that specifically. It's very responsive to both touch and device size, and we'll just drill into a couple to give you a flavor for what the end result of our discussion today is going to be. What you'll notice on the board here is we've got a couple of different pieces of information, and we're looking at risk and in the context of certain risk metrics or risk indicators for this particular example. We're able quickly to build these dashboards through configuration that allows our users to filter by different types of risk and sub-risk, and we can look across a time horizon, so we can see information and kind of stretch and expand time, and instantly you're changing the data that's presented to you. Okay, and all of this can be written by very novice users. And we'll get into that in a moment. But again, the big part of this is very visual. What you'll see here, we're contracting the screen to look, and it just automatically morphs the way you would on a tablet or on a phone. So again, without having to do responsive design or do a lot of UAT for different browsers or app types, you're able to deploy this in different settings and take advantage of some great reports. Okay. So with that, what we want to do is we actually want to go in and show an example. Right now, what we're looking at is we're looking at the SQL Server Mobile Report Publisher. So it's a piece of this puzzle, and what we'll just orient everyone who, if you haven't seen this before, I think this is a very end-user report-friendly type of a tool to use. So one of the things you're able to do is you're able to control what they are called these tiles. So there's a grid and column layout, and you can determine which of the report elements fit on the screen. So you've got a variety of options off to the left that are known as navigators. So there are things like that drop-down list of risks that we showed you, the time navigator, and then a variety of options of charts, graphs, maps, which are kind of interesting. So you can plot geo data as well as certain grids. And what's, I think, very compelling about this particular solution is that you think layout first. So it's the presentation layer and how do I want to arrange and organize and present or visualize this information, and then we get into the data and the mechanics of connecting the data. So you can really quickly sit and iterate with folks, and what we're showing now is it also comes kind of baked in with certain tools. So as you're optimizing for the device, and you're designing this, you can kind of toggle between the phone, a tablet, and a master view. So some of these you might, your user base might be exclusively on a phone, and you can really optimize just for that and just quickly and easily kind of test and iterate as you go. Okay? So what I'd like to do is we'd like to show an example of issues. And what these are for people, everyone understands what problems are in corporate America. If you've got a function that's tracking all of those, maybe it's internal audit, risk management, compliance, and you've got some data that relates to issues, this is a way to kind of bring that to life and to show that. And what we'll do is we'll just pick an example. We're going to drag one of the gauges over, and what this particular gauge is going to be designed to do is we're going to get into a part of issues, and you might want to track the completion status. So what you'll notice here is you've got a lot of configurability on the visual properties in terms of titling, accenting, determining what's positive or negative in terms of the color palette that you're going to see as values move. You can represent things as a difference or a delta from one value, or you obviously can change number information. So is my data currency or general? So we'll go ahead with that general one. So again, you have all the properties to control over the visualization, and then we'll talk about the data. And what we're going to do here from a data standpoint, and this is really fundamental, and we'll get into it a little bit later about how we connect the data to the system, but once we do that, you're able to access, think of it as tables or views very simply. In this particular presentation, we're trying to say, within our issue management list, we want to compare our completed action plans, which we know there's data in there that says when it was complete, with all of the action plans. Okay? And we have options. So I can maybe summarize that, take the max or the min, different graphs are going to have different presentations, and we can go ahead and kind of update that as we go. And then we'll get into preview mode here, and what you're going to be able to see is from my data set, this is now another tile that's part of the bigger tile landscape, and I can create drill through if I wanted to. And you'll notice there as I scroll over, and this is very important on a phone, it's got some touch responsiveness, so if things are a little small, I can kind of highlight that, and it'll either kind of blow up, or I can drill through. And what's nice, everybody, is you could drill into other dashboards. You could go to custom URLs to get other pieces of information rendered for folks. And again, what's really nice is just within a couple of minutes there, you're able to kind of preview this completion progress report with a real indicator of we've got basically 99 out of 257 complete, and since we targeted it a certain way, we're about almost 28% complete, which is not good, right? So again, very readily able to create those and build those as we go. I think what's important here is, again, that each tile can be connected to different data sources. So we could connect, kind of mix and match the data. We might have one tile pulling in information from an ERP, a few of them coming from SharePoint lists, some of them coming from Excel, whatever kind of data mart you have, or for some of us, it's a big grab bag of data, we're able to unify all that in these kind of top-level dashboards, and then again, drill through and give people a very good responsive experience. Okay? And here's a good example of a phone preview. So for those of us who've been at this long enough, you recognize, years ago, just trying to test and validate, and if you had to push that into production and deal with that, this is just a great answer for quickly and easily refining, iterating. And many of you who join us on these sessions, you have some kind of IT function, and this is a great way to add a ton of value and sit with your leadership or your business community and quickly iterate and loop through. And we found a strong renewed interest in many SharePoint solutions where people are just plugging away forms and lists and then bringing this in more of a rich app experience, and people really aren't any wiser that the data is sitting in SharePoint. So it's really helped with quite a bit of adoption. So what I want to do then is I want to take a moment and we'll go to our slides and we'll kind of talk about how we connected that data. And before Mike begins, I want to just kind of explain at one level, it's a relatively simple and easy type of experience where you got a four-part. You're going to essentially create the data source. You're going to connect it to a data set. We're going to pull that into reports like we showed, a pretty simple example, and then publish that out. And I'll let Mike walk through a few of the steps as we go through those four.
Great, perfect. So now that you've actually seen the SQL mobile reports and we've actually shown you how you can build your dashboards and configure those tiles, again, the only thing that you need to get to that point is to connect to your data. So as Michael established there, we really just need to create a data source. In this instance, we'll be creating a SharePoint data source, which would be a SharePoint site. We'll be creating a data set, which would just be the list that your data is living in, and then we'll create data sets based on that. We would then pull it into the report publisher, and when we're ready to publish that and make it available to your users, that's the final step. So in this first step, creating a SharePoint data source, within the SQL Server Reporting Services application, which is a separate application, you'll select to create a new data source where you'll be prompted with the following form. Here you simply need to provide a name for your data source, maybe a description. You'll select the connection type. In this instance is a SharePoint list. But again, as Michael stated, it could be Hyperion, it could be Oracle, SAP, it could be a SQL database. So there's a variety of different data sources that we could pull into. For this instance, again, we're going to use SharePoint lists. The connection string, you just simply need to provide the URL to your SharePoint site that you want to connect to. And then the final part, you just have to provide credentials to authenticate yourself into that site. And then you'll save that data source back to your server. After that, you'll go into that same application and select create a new data set based on the data source that we just created, which will bring up a SQL report builder. And what you'll see in that SQL report builder is on the left-hand side, you'll see this database view. Now, this is just the structure of your SharePoint site. This will show you all of the sub-sites that live within the SharePoint site, as well as the lists and libraries. So you'll be able to go through here and you'll see that we've expanded our issue management list. This is where we were pulling our data in the previous example. We can go through and select the different views that we'd like to bring in, and then we select the individual site columns that we want to include in our data set. As you select those different items, they'll start to appear over here on the right in your query designer. So you'll see all the site columns that you want to pull in, and then you can also apply various filters and parameters to bring in just certain subsets of that data that you'd like to use. You're able to actually, at the top here, you can run the query, and then the query results section at the bottom will give you the opportunity to validate that the site columns that you've brought in and the filters and parameters you've applied are returning the data that you would expect. Once you've done that successfully, you just simply need to save that data set back to that same server. You'll notice that some other data sets that we've saved here will also pop up. Our all issues data set, we could have our high risk rating issue data set, and this one we would have saved as our active issues data set. After you do that, you'll jump back into that SQL Mobile Reports Publisher tool that Michael was working in. And what you'll notice is that if you go into the Data tab where we previously were, you'll see your report elements, all of the tiles that we've put into our dashboard, and then there's a button to simply add your data. At that point, you'll be prompted, do you want to pull this data from Excel or your report server? So you have the option of doing either, and you can pull both into the same dashboard. And as Michael mentioned, you could pull multiple data sources from a lot of different systems all within the same dashboard. Here we've saved our data set into a report server, so we would select that. Then you would simply need to connect to that server, the URL, and authenticate to that. Then you would be prompted and you would just have to select the server that we're looking to get into. And from there, all of the data sets that we've created and saved to that server would be at your disposal to bring into your dashboards and reports. Finally, all you need to do is save that report back to the server, and then you would want to publish that report and make it available to your users. We've also provided an MSDN link in the deck that we'll have from today that goes through these instructions and steps it out a little bit more if you'd like to reference it. And it also provides you with a link to download the SQL Mobile Reports Publisher application for free right from their website.
So what I'd like to do is we're going to just talk a couple minutes before we take questions about the report user experience and some things we've learned. I think what's really key is understanding, first of all, your data. I think the second piece of the puzzle is understanding your audience, and then the mode in which they're going to interact with this information. So, you may have a more traditional workforce, very desktop heavy. You may have a mobile sales force that, is tablet, and then maybe, a lot of millennial employees that are, exclusively phone. So designing for the device is important. And then as it gets into the data, what's really key, as anyone who's gone through a report exercise understands, is, having a rich sample data set, and then really going through a process of iteration and looping, both from kind of like a starting dashboard perspective, as well as all the drill through and giving people the context that they need to make some of these decisions. What we've been experiencing is even connecting a few dots where, in addition to just information, there's a kind of a chat type capability so that you can, have a back and forth about activities for certain key reports, as well as have a drill down that goes to a custom URL that may be, let's say, for example, a SharePoint list form. So they could fill out actions where if they didn't like, in our example earlier, the fact that something was not complete, they could send out a task or a to-do to someone. So you can extend that beyond just the visualization and make it more of an application. And we've been working with clients to do both, which is to really enrich the reporting experience for senior executives, as well as use this as kind of a landing pad to begin a whole nother process, which is the correction and modification of risks and issues. So what I'd like to do, Mike, we can go back into the preview mode for a moment and just touch on a couple of quick things there, again, from a capability standpoint. And what I'd like to stress is the high degree of configurability with SQL Server Mobile Reports. So, we're showing here an ability to change the landscape from the number of tiles. We can adjust the background colors. So one thing you can actually do is have this match maybe more of a corporate palette. If you've got, master pages or style sheets, there are things that are relatively easy there. And then as we get into individual gauges, what we can do is we can see that for each and every one of these, Mike earlier put kind of a title in, but we can control all kinds of pieces of this puzzle, in terms of accenting. We talked before about the currency versus a number, getting into the display mode or the percentage information. So not unlike, pivot tables or things in Excel that are very user-friendly, we find ourselves working quite dynamically with folks there, getting information in. And what I can't stress enough is when we get into some of the details, what we're able to do is we're able to really control data. So here I may have a grid that's like a list or a SharePoint list. Not unlike in SharePoint, I can actually decide exactly the types of information that I'd like shown, and I can enter in, options for how I want information displayed, if it's in Europe, if it's in the U.S., and then I can really just pick and choose all the insights that I want to share with my user community. And the whole purpose of our discussion today is to kind of share with everyone that this is relatively easy to do and gives you a lot of power and capability. One we've done quite a bit is, I'll go ahead and just quickly shrink this particular one, is we've started to see a lot with geography. So let's say you've got regional sales offices. This is a great report that can truly get a lot of insight into an organization. So, and here I'm just kind of showing some different capabilities where I'm kind of dragging and expanding information. In a SharePoint list or even like an Excel type download, trying to present meaningful information in this way is very hard, and oftentimes, well, you've got a lot of rich content in a SharePoint site, it's just too much. People don't have a tolerance to look at, list after list, and even if they can sort or export it, but, bringing that together in, a heat map, which is maybe total sales by state, and kind of giving some people some idea of what that is, that can be very helpful. So, I know we're coming up on our question time, but again, I think that what I wanted to stress to everyone here is how within reach this is. So within the SQL stack, you're able to create mobile reports, connect them to the various data sources, and then really develop a rich user experience that allows all the different device type users to connect with this information. And the last thing I'll say is it's not like a development exercise that's traditional. While you want to have QA over this process, to iterate, republish, tweak, refine at the presentation layer is very simple and easy, and can be managed by people who don't maybe have some of the traditional skills of a report writer, where you had to build the data, understand the data mart, have deep coding skills in terms of, if it's Cognos or business objects or crystal reports or whatever you use historically, there's an element there that's within your hands. What I will say is that that comes at a cost, where this is, there's a finite set of configurations and it's not endless. You can't get in and code over the top of this, but there is a lot of capability, some of which also gets into things like settings and determining, when dates start, how to handle caching. So one of the things, if you're taking it down locally, you can enable caching, so if people aren't connected, they're on a train, let's say you're in a big city, you can get the current information cached for you. There's also a security element where we can persist certain security from the SharePoint side or just at the report side. Obviously being in the Microsoft stack integrates real well with a lot of the authentication techniques and information. So just a lot of control there that you probably haven't had in the past. And really we just encourage everyone to explore this. Obviously Protiviti stands ready to help you. And, again, it's not that daunting of an exercise. We've found a lot of capabilities for power users, and the wow factor in terms of what it looks like at the end is, almost in my career, I haven't seen something this capable of giving you a lot of impact relative to what it takes to connect the dots and to create these kind of systems. So really strong capability. So with that, I want to open it up for questions. I know we've gotten some coming through the chat and through our other kind of avenues.
Great, thanks, Michael. What data sources outside of SharePoint lists can we use in mobile reports?
We've started to talk about a few of them. SharePoint lists are the most dominant one we've been working on, but SQL, other databases like Oracle,
Hyperion,
SAP.
You can bring in XML.
You can bring in XML.
And the true power of it, too, is being able to create all those various data sources and then surfacing them on one dashboard. So, you can have all these various data points, but they can all be brought into one place and reported on in one page or one dashboard.
And I would add, what's a great ability as well is Excel. So it's the ultimate filler when it comes to data gaps, where that can be a very low-tech process behind the scenes, but end up with a very sophisticated outcome. And you can, the business users can use that to kind of fill in some holes, maybe either why the data is getting created or collated. So yeah, those are the primary sources that we've been connecting with.
Okay, great. In your design process, when you decided to use SQL Server Mobile versus Power BI, that also has options for mobile publishing, what was the criteria for your tool selection?
You know, to be real clear, we have an all of the above philosophy with our clients. So we do use, you know, Power BI and other tools for that matter. Where I think the use case is strong for this particular implementation is the ability to get quickly to a device and to iterate and loop and present things in a very configurable way. So more of a business analyst has a power to do this, and it's got some options that Power BI does not have, but it's not to say one's like better than the other. They just have different considerations for why you may use one or the other. And certainly happy to get into that in more detail if people would like to follow up, you know, when's the best time to use which reporting package.
Okay, great. How much data can it handle? Have you encountered limitations that slowed it down because it had too much data?
You know, we have not seen that so far. Much of that is also like with all these problems is you can index the data, you can kind of narrow the data so it's just summation information and the details separate. So we haven't seen that, and we've been, you know, tens of thousands of records, and have not seen any kind of performance-related problems. Part of that is the caching helps a lot, you know, so you can cache data, and again, this has sort of been optimized for this type of experience. So I've not seen data limitations.
You can also control, alongside the caching, you can control how often the data refreshes. So you have the ability to control that if it's fairly static data that might only update once a week, or you could bring it down, you know, if you needed that data to be refreshed, you know, every 10, 15 minutes would be a possibility as well. So just another option that is put in the user's hands.
Okay, great. What are some lessons learned after building multiple SQL mobile reports?
Yeah, I think it's with all these, it's really understanding the data and what people, how they want to see the data transformed. And, you know, it goes from data to information to intelligence, and you need a group of people that can kind of go through that progression with you. Some of it's technical and configuration like we've talked about. Some of it's the actual bits and bytes of the data, but most of it is really sitting with the business and understanding what is meaningful, what's compelling. You know, when you get in a lot of metrics and quant stuff, it's the math side of it, and just does it add up and does it reconcile? So it's really, that is the greatest challenge. And the good thing is it's not insurmountable. It typically involves a collaboration with a couple of different people, potentially even a partner, and to just understand the data from all the different angles so you can bring it together. What's great is the cost of construction is pretty low, so your effort is in the design and thinking, and then you can kind of keep fine-tuning and iterating the visualization on top of it.
Okay, great. We had another question about the recording. The recording of today's session will be on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ProtivitiSP, along with an archive of all of our past sessions. I think that is it for today. Thank you, Michael and Mike, for the great presentation and all of the great information. Our contact information is on the screen. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.
Definitely. Thank you for your time. If there are questions, please follow up with myself or Julia, and wish you the best of luck with your mobile reporting.
Great. Thanks, everyone.